want to talk about my dad. My dad, Larry White, that was his name. He lived to be 82 years old. He was a cigarette smoking, whiskey drinking, gin rummy playing, World War II, talk off the side of your mouth. Everybody's trying to steal my money. Manly, 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 man. If I ever brought him to a folk concert, his molecules wouldn't hold together. And he never did one thing that he was supposed to do in order to live a long time. He just kept on living. He hadn't cracked a sweat since the 50s. He hadn't eaten a vegetable since World War II. He just ate red meat, smoked Kent cigarettes, and drank Seagram 7 and kept on living. One of my last conversations with him, he said to me, "Donnie," that's the way he talked, "Donnie, I found a new fried clam place." I'm like, "Dad, what did your doctor say about eating fried clams?" "My doctor?" I'm like, "Yeah." "The one that told me to stop eating fried clams?" I'm like, "Yeah." "He died 20 years ago!" "You want to live to be 82? Let's get some fried clam." Now, my dad was Irish, and my mother was Greek. And as we all know, those two nationalities are forbidden from reproducing. For good reason. Now, it wasn't easy for them. They had to fight everybody to get married back in those days, you know. On the Irish side, my dad bought a little bit of time by allowing his parents to believe that my mother was Italian. Kind of dark, don't like that, but at least she's Catholic. Well, she wasn't Catholic, but she was still dark, and big problems over there. Now, on the other side, the Greek side, my grandfather, John Soteropoulos, he was the sexton at the St. George Greek Orthodox Church. He was the guy that made sure that the church, the altar was shiny and beautiful so that God would feel happy there every Sunday, and that there was a 50-gallon bucket of frankincense so that Father Myhos could asphyxiate the congregation every week. Have you ever been to the Greek church? Anybody? Oh my God, you're like, what the hell? And when he found out that his daughter was marrying, of all things, a Catholic, he lost his mind. He lost his mind. He wouldn't go to the wedding. He wouldn't talk to anybody. He was disgusted. He was sure all his grandchildren were going to hell. It turns out he was right about that. But for reasons he could have never dreamed of. So, that's the way it is, that's the way I am. Now, when you partake in this forbidden cross-pollination of cultures, many bizarre and weird things happen. And in our family, what happened was we got this really strange sense of humor. Now, and one of the idiosyncrasies of our particular sense of humor is that we tend to be the most funny in the most inappropriate situations. Church would be one that would come to mind. Or funerals, perfect example. The way it works with us is the more pressure that we're under, the more funny that we are. Funeral, excellent example. A lot of pressure. Person's dead, everybody's crying, we feel bad, we want to cry, but you are not going to see us cry. That is not going to happen. So we are going to break the tension with humor. We know that it infuriates you. But on behalf of my family, going back 100 generations, I just want to say to everybody here, we do not care about you. We're just trying to take care of ourselves, and this is the only way that we know how. So, let me give you an example. 15 years ago, my dad got pneumonia. He wouldn't go to the doctor. He doesn't like doctors. Turns out, they don't like him either. Hadn't been to the doctor for 40 years. We're like, "Dad, who's your primary care physician?" It's like, "I don't know. I was in the Navy, 1945 in Norfolk, Virginia. Some guy stuck a needle in my ass. Was that him?" We're like, no, Dad, that's not your primary care physician. So he doesn't want to go to the doctor. He's got pneumonia. He wants to treat it like a hangover. We're like, Dad, Alka-Seltzer ain't going to cure pneumonia. You have to go to the doctor. I don't want to go to the doctor. I hate the doctor. They're just trying to steal my money. My sister goes over and she has a negotiation with him. And she comes down from the negotiations. And this is what she said. Fried Clam Larry, that's what we call him. Fried Clam Larry. Fried Clam Larry has agreed to go to the emergency room provided that he gets to smoke 100 cigarettes on the ride over. So we bring him to the emergency room, and he's smoking and complaining, this is a bad job, they're just trying to steal my money, I just need some Alka-Seltzer. So we get in there, and we walk in, and right away, a nurse from across the room, she points him out. You, the old bastard with the cigarette, come here. And she puts this thing on his finger to it registers how much oxygen is in your blood. So she takes it off, and she looks at it. She looks at him. She looks back at the thing. She shakes it a little bit like this. She gives it a couple of these. Ping, ping. According to this, Mr. White, you're dead. But since you don't have the good sense to fall down, I think you should come with us. We have a nice bed for you up in intensive care. So we go up to intensive care. Now he's unconscious. They got a vent breathing for him, machines everywhere, tubes and things beeping. They got him on morphine. Morphine. I don't know if you knew this, but apparently there's some kind of rule up the hospital about the family not having any. I figured it was worth asking. But no, only Larry was getting any morphine this day. Now, don't get me wrong, I love that guy. My dad had a theory that he imparted to all of us. And the theory is this. Be yourself, let them deal with it. That should be written right here. But anyway, I love him. I loved him, and so, having a little fun at his expense, but don't get me wrong. They told me he was going to die. My brother and I were there, and so it was hard. Unless you've ever been in that situation, it's hard. And so I guess you could say, for my brother and I, there was a lot of pressure on us. So we're basically saying goodbye to this guy that we love a lot. And my brother's on one side of the bed, and he looks across the bed, and he says to me, Ma told him to quit smoking. He didn't listen. And I said, that's right, Michael. She told him to quit smoking, and he didn't listen. And then my brother says to me, Ma told him to quit drinking. He didn't listen. And I say, that's right. She told him to quit drinking, and he didn't listen. And then my brother says to me, the one time she tells him to drop dead, he listens. And we're laughing and laughing, and the nurses are walking by. What is wrong with this family? Now, Larry was a World War II dad. Now, there was no such thing as a cuddly World War II dad, okay? Hippies invented the cuddly dad later, okay? But if you have a dad from World War II, my dad's idea of telling you that he loved you was to slip $20 in your hand, little slap in the head, hey, go buy your girl something. That was like a big, wet, sloppy hug kiss from dad. So the one nurturing moment, paternal moment, that I had with Fried Clam Larry is noteworthy, so I'm going to describe it to you. one day he comes up to me and he says, Donnie, I have some wisdom that I want to impart to you so that no one in my family ever has to learn this the hard way. I'm going to give it to you. You're going to teach your children. They're going to teach their children. And I will rest easy up at Pine Grove Cemetery. I go, okay, Dad, what is it? It turns out that he wanted to talk about gun control. It's a complex issue. I really didn't know that Fried Clam Larry had the wherewithal to think it through so thoroughly, but he had. And this is the wisdom that he gave me, and I'm going to share it with you now. He said to me, no drinking man with half a brain would ever have a gun in his house. And I said, why, Dad? And he said, because, son, sooner or later, your wife will shoot you with it. I'm getting kind of emotional just talking about it. So the reason I'm telling you about Larry, 7 years ago, he had a really bad time of it. My mother went to bed, had a stroke, next day, dead. They had just finished their evening argument. Their evening argument that they had every evening for 51 years, and the next day she was gone. And so he was wrecked. He didn't know what to do. She did everything for him. She was one of those people who did everything for her husband. So after she died, I'm not sure that he knew how a sandwich worked. Like there were like too many moving parts in it for him to figure out. So after the funeral, we had to go over to the house and give names to all the appliances for him. Larry, this big white thing, that's called a stove. Be careful, hot. This other thing over here, that's called a microwave. If you want a cup of tea, put some water in a cup, open the door, put the cup in, close the door. This button turns it on. This other button here is a timer. You know what, Larry? On second thought, never touch that thing. Now, my mother was born in the wrong time. My mother was born in the wrong time. She would have went to Woodstock. She would have hitchhiked around the country. She would have done everything. She wanted to be a rebel so bad. But she graduated from high school in the 40s, and there was nobody to be a rebel with. It was just her and James Dean, and that was it. And so she lived vicariously through my rotten friends that I had. And being the good son that I am, I accrued a tremendous amount of rotten friends for my mother to hang around with. So when they would be getting chased by the cops, or run away from home, or like escape from juvenile hall, she would hide them down the cellar and let them tell her the stories. My house was like the Underground Railroad for wayward children. And they would sit down in the basement and smoke, and she would just drink in their stories of crimes and misdemeanors like the nutrients that she was deprived of when she was a child. And she would just drink it, and she loved. All the rotten kids loved them. And at the funeral, they all showed up. All of them. They were on, what do you call them? Day passes. Day passes. So, they all showed up at the funeral. It was crowded. My mother was Greek, but not religious. But her sisters demanded that we bring the deacon from the St. George Church to come and talk and keep on talking and not stop talking and talk some more and keep on talking and not stop talking. And so he's up there, my mother's laid out here, and he's saying, please, Jesus, forgive Fotigny. That's my mother's name in Greek, Fotigny. Please forgive Fotigny for her sins. Not just the sins she committed while she was alive, but even the ones that she's committing now that she's dead. And please, Jesus, forgive Fortuny for the sins she thought about doing but never got around to. And my brother is just a regular guy. And he's sitting next to me, and he's saying to me, "What sins? That's my mother. I'm gonna kill this guy." And we're trying to keep my brother from killing the deacon. And we're calming him down. In the front row here, we have my mother's 3 sisters. I guess at that time would have been 86, 84, 82 years old. Now, I don't know in your mind if you have a picture of old Greek women at a funeral. I certainly do. Does the color black come to mind? And there they are. Now the matriarch, the oldest one, Constantina, she sends one of my cousins over with a message for my dad. So my dad, me, and my brother and sister are sitting there. My mother's laid out here. Everybody's standing here because it's crowded. And here comes my cousin with a message from my mother's sister. And this is the message. She says to me, loud enough for the 4 of us to hear. "Connie says to tell Larry that his fly's open." Now remember, my dad is wrecked. He's broken. Like my mother was snatched from him after 51 years. He looked to me like he was so ruined that every time he exhaled, he might not have the strength to inhale. So I guess you could say that there was a mountain of pressure on Larry. Galaxies of pressure were pressing down on Fry Clam Larry. And she says, "Tell Larry his fly's open." And I look, and something went pink in his eye. And it wasn't even big enough to be a twinkle. It was like a half a twinkle. It was a twink. Twink! And it had some mischief in it. Mischief that went all the way back to 1938, stealing milk bottles off of somebody's front porch at 4 a.m. before they woke up. And I knew that something was going to come out of his mouth that would be memorable. And he looks at my cousin, and he looks at us with the little twink in his eye. And he goes, "You tell Auntie Connie, what can't get up, can't get out." And we're laughing, and we're laughing. You know, you laugh so hard you fall out of the chair. When people think, "Oh my God, we have to call an ambulance," the family, "Wait a minute, they're laughing. What's wrong with these people?"